All right, folks, I think we can go ahead and get started here. So I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for the webinar today, Beyond the Object, Crafting Narrative-Driven Digital Experiences. As a quick introduction, I'm Dan Rael. I'm one of the founders of CatalogIt, and joining me today is my friend Todd Hoeft. He's one of the founders of Visitor. CatalogIt and Visitor have been collaborating on a number of projects with mutual clients now for some time. So our goal in the webinar is to provide you with some tools to help you craft the stories that your individual things into overall experiences that will be more meaningful and educational for your public. So as we go through the webinar, feel free to ask any questions. There's a little Q&A feature within Zoom, so use that Q&A feature. We're going to try and answer all the questions at the end. We should have plenty of time at the end of the webinar to go through those questions. And if we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll be glad to respond via email afterwards. So feel free to use that Q&A. Okay, folks, let's get going. All right. So within CatalogIt, you see that we describe CatalogIt as being a platform for telling the story of things. You know, each item in your collection has its own story and often a whole number of stories. So these stories all relate to and connect to other items within your collections, but not only within your collections, but within the community, within the context of time and place. So telling these stories in a compelling and an engaging way will make your collections much more meaningful to your audiences and to your institution. Will leave a much more memorable and a lasting impression. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about sort of the fundamentals of storytelling. These are good things to keep in mind as you're crafting your exhibitions. So a good story has several parts. So it's got the characters. So every story needs to have relatable characters that the audience can connect with. The characters of your stories don't have to be people necessarily. They can be organizations, communities, or even the objects themselves can certainly be the characters. So a strong character has kind of goals and motivations and flaws that help kind of just drive the story forward. The story should have a setting or context. This is really the kind of the where and when of the story. It establishes the world and the circumstances that shape the character's actions. A good story has something along the lines of conflict. This is sort of the engine of the story, the challenges, the tension, the obstacles that the characters have to overcome. That conflict really helps to contribute to the development of the movement of the story and the emotional investment that people will have in the story. Another thing a good story has is emotion, and that's expressed through voice and style. So you have to think about the ways you can incorporate emotion into your stories. The story will stick more when people can feel that they have some sort of, feel something from the story, that, you know, some sort of emotion, suspense or joy or sadness or maybe empathy or inspiration. And the way that you write your story will contribute to the emotional connection that the audience is going to feel. They'll have a strong influence or impact and memorability from it. Think about your tone and the pacing and the specific imagery and language that you're using when you're crafting that story. And then also keep in mind the theme or the message that you want to convey, the deeper the meaning or insight you want to have your story project. The themes make the story really feel significant, whether it's about resilience or change or maybe justice or identity, whatever your theme is. Let's move to the next slide. So the story, of course, also has to have a narrative, a structure. So you want to stitch together those things into something that's really cohesive, a real cohesive structure. Most basically, that would be like the beginning, the middle, and the end, the sequence of the story. The structure helps the audience follow along and participate and kind of, you know, anticipate what might come next, and it sort of incentivizes them to look to that next, what's going to be this next step, and they'll want to proceed through the story. The concept of a narrative arc can be really useful here. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment here. Let's talk a little bit just about organization. So using your folders in CatalogIt is a great way to help you organize those stories. So I'd suggest you create folders for the points that we just discussed earlier, the characters, the setting, the conflict, etc. So, and then start searching your collections for items that can help develop that portion of the story. You're likely to find things in your collections that maybe you hadn't considered at all for this particular exhibition. Maybe something like historic newspapers or photographs that will really contribute to the setting, to what was happening in the world at that particular time. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, the narrative arc. So a narrative arc is really the overall shape or kind of the structure of the story, the way that it moves from the beginning to the end. So it's sort of the path as the story builds and reaches a high point and then sort of resolve. The narrative arc is the progression of the story through its key stages. It gives the story a sense of movement and emotional impact. It guides the audience from a starting point kind of to a meaningful conclusion. You can think of it as sort of like the curve of a mountain. It starts with the exposition, that's setting the scene and introducing the characters, and then it's rising up. There's some sort of action, there's complications and conflicts, and the stakes are building. And then there's some sort of climax or turning point, or it's sort of the most intense moment of the story. And then it starts the tension starts to ease and the consequences start to unfold and things start to resolve. And at the end, you've got sort of a resolution, some wrap up to the story that provides a closure. Your goal is really to leave your visitor with a better understanding and insight and perhaps some sort of feeling and emotion from the story. Next slide. So let's touch again on the objects that are going to be part of your story. As I mentioned earlier, it's really worthwhile to search across your collections for items that will contribute to the various parts of the story you want to tell. Again, and using folders to organize those into chapters for your story will be really helpful. As you add your items into those folders, look carefully at the records. Clean them up as much as you possibly can. You're going to want to really look carefully at the data, make sure the data is as accurate as possible. Add as many more details to those records as you can, and be sure that the images you have are as good of a quality as you can use. And then also keep in mind that the folders are the levels of publishing in CatalogIt. They're the levels of publishing out to the web. So that the folders that you're using now for your initial organization can be folders that you publish later on. And each of those items that you put in the folder will be available for the API. And that's something Todd will talk about later on. So that's not only do they exist in that published folder, but they're available for the API to pull out and use for other things. So Todd will get into that. Let's go to the next slide. So here's just a few more additional tips to keep in mind regarding the story itself. So stories are more memorable and impactful when the audience can feel some kind of connection to them. So you want to try to incorporate human connections and utilize personal anecdotes as much as you possibly can. You know, in this image here from the Neil Cochrane house, this is a French desk. You know, it's got all kinds of stories there. So it was made in France around 1870. So who are the craftsmen that created it? You know, who were these people? And also this desk was made again in 1870, but it's Louis XV style. So that means it's from a style of a king that lived 100 years before that. So what was that all about? Where did those materials come from that made the desk? How did it get from France to Texas? Who owned it? How did it end up at the Neil Cochrane house? Who used it? What sorts of things were kept in that desk? So there's all kinds of stories that this desk can tell just on its own, and then it relates out to a whole web of other stories. Now, I'm going to hand the presentation off to Todd, and he'll talk a little bit about ways to use your published items.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Hoeft with PrimeSite Web Solutions, one of the co-developers of Visitor Us. I hope everyone's having a great day. Thanks for being with us. Let's continue the discussion from where Dan just left off. So you learned how CatalogIt allows you to craft a narrative or a story about a single object or a handful of individual objects. Like you can say how it was made, who owned it, how it was used, where is it now, other interesting stories that go along with how it was acquired. But Visitor allows you to take all of those objects and craft an overall institution-wide digital experience or a themed tour. So all the objects and their individual stories, they all tie into the greater story. The related objects can support each other's narratives within the digital experience. And by describing how objects were used and by whom, you bring personal stories into the full tour experience or narrative. Next slide, please. So now that you have your object narratives figured out, the next step is to figure out how you want to present all that data, because you've learned that your CatalogIt collection is waiting for you to craft a full experience. So what type of digital experience or virtual tour would you like to feature? You could do audio only. You could do text, images, and video only. You could do immersive virtual 360 views with some sound in some instances. But why build a digital experience at all? Well, there are some very important reasons. You can expand your geographical outreach. You can tear down accessibility issues. You can preserve your exhibits and spaces and also create a chronology of past exhibits. And you can also create multiple experiences for different audiences. For example, language tours, different age tours, and different interest tours. Next slide, please. So CatalogIt makes sharing data easy, and it's one of the advantages as a collection management system. It's how you can web publish to the CatalogIt hub. If you've used that before, you can share certain objects without needing to be logged into your CatalogIt account. And you can even utilize the WordPress plugin to showcase certain objects within your collection. So Visitor, as a digital experience platform, leveraged the API to bring web published objects into our system easily. It was designed to allow users to manage their objects just in one place. And the Visitor system's connection to CatalogIt makes it easy to pull object data from any CatalogIt object and present it into each experience. Visitor has a one-click CatalogIt sync button. Each time this is selected, any object in CatalogIt that is already set to web publish will populate into the Visitor system. And the objects that already existed in the system will be updated. And if they weren't already in the system, they will be populated into the system. And these objects can then be placed into your experiences. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about how it works. But let's discuss how you take your objects and put together your tour or experience based on those objects. So the first step, just like any other project, is planning. You use whatever tools you're comfortable with. You can have digital notes that you can share with your team online. You can have paper notes. You can see an example of some paper notes used for a project from one of our clients here on the screen. What are the goals of this experience or tour? What type of group will the experience cover? Who is the target audience? If you define these details up front, that will help you gauge the best way to go about setting up your themed experience. Next slide. So while the terminology might be different from platform to platform, within Visitor, we refer to an experience as a tour. The tour is the theme or the story of the digital experience. What story are you trying to tell? So from here, you'll ask yourself the following important questions. Does your experience theme meet the mission or goals of your institution? Does your experience plan meet the goals of your visitors? Does your experience provide ease of accessibility? And there are many types of accessibility: physical, knowledge, conceptual, technological. Our example of the Neil Cochran House that Dan mentioned before is a shared customer and a shared project. We're developing a general audiences tour that will provide access to stops on both the first and the second floors of the historic Austin house, plus the slave quarters and the gardens of the property. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the Visitor system, we refer to any space, intangible concept, or location that you wish to put focus on is a stop. It can be a room or a space. It could be a place to learn about a happening in history. It can be a marker for a historic event. It could be a building or another area that is important. So with that said, it makes sense to choose the stops based on their relevance to your tour or theme. So for example, if your theme is a general overview tour of your site or institution, then most, if not all, of your stops will be featured. But for example, if your tour theme revolves around how communication technology helped the residents of a historic home help during the war effort, you could localize your stops to just those that have that relevance. If your institution is an archive or a gallery, you might have a bunch of individual tours or experiences that tell the story of one artist or one art movement, art period, art medium or style. You might have a limited exhibit space. So you'd like to document past exhibits for visitors that may have missed viewing those exhibits in person. Your platform should allow you to create multiple tours that focus on varied themes. Like here on this example, we know life in the home might be a general tour. A communication technology during the interwar period, that might focus on how the home went from newspaper to telephone technology during that time. And accessibility in a home before the Disabilities Act, when your space has no accessible way to move from space to space, that you could feature what that looked like for the residents. So at the Neil Cochran House in Austin, Texas, we're putting heavy focus on the lifestyle of the occupants. And while the entire home and grounds will be part of an overall general tour, our focus on the slave quarters will be a detailed experience. Next slide, please. So first off, yes, this is a real object found in the Neil Cochran House CatalogIt account. So just like stops, an object can be a tangible collection item, a concept, an idea, an audio or video oral history that you want to feature within any given stop that helps move the storyline along. So you'll assign objects to a stop to help your narrative, and this will allow your visitor to access information you've added to the object record, pulling in details directly from CatalogIt objects. Now, let's take a look at our next slide, a demo object from this project. So this is the same CatalogIt object that Dan referred to before, the desk. Using CatalogIt's object identification, the visitor system can pull relevant data, as in this case, the image and the details. So what's unique about this view of the object is the title at the top, which can be specific to your story. So this desk is found in the French parlor. So here we refer to it as the French parlor desk, but it could easily be called Pappy's favorite desk, or the desk that traveled 4,000 miles, something that links its relevance to your overarching storyline. You can also see some visitor context. Think of this as the story layer that you can add on top of your object data that you see here under the object details moniker. You weave the story of this piece into your overarching storyline. Next slide, please. Now, engagement is one of the most important aspects of your digital experience. After all, what is the point if you can't be engaging? If you're focused on education or creating new and unique experiences, the visitor platform features what we call tasks. Now, these are objects that present to the visitor an image, an audio, or a video file, then expects a response. So for example, you could throw a Where's Waldo type image up into the experience and give them a selection of answers to choose from. Let your visitors play an audio clip, then ask them to answer a question about it. Tasks are often very casual, requiring the visitor to keep trying until they get the right answer, unless they know it right away, of course. But for even more exciting experiences, Visitor allows you the ability to make an assessment or escape room type experiences, where you can present them with a secret clue when they provide a correct answer, something to unlock a later part of your tour, or perhaps give them a discount code for your museum store next time they visit. Next slide, please. Okay, so you have everything put together. You have your tours, your stops, your objects, perhaps your tasks. Now it's time to test it and market it. So before you do that, you have to get everyone on board with this venture if you haven't already. Buy-in is full support of your digital experience by every member of an institution's staff. Most of the time, this will happen before you start a project, but sometimes it happens after or in the middle of the process. So you can allow your docents to be part of the experience. Because specific objects can feature oral histories or video excerpts, you can let them pick their favorite item to talk about, either on camera or as an audio recording. You can assure them that this new digital tool is an enhancement rather than a replacement for them. Unless it is a replacement, and then you're kind of on your own with that. So next, we'll talk about feedback. Testing. Testing is essential. You test often. Use different devices, different operating systems, different browsers. You won't be able to test every scenario, and you won't be able to cover all the variables, but do your best to get a wide sampling of devices out there. Alpha test it with trusted persons prior to making it live to make sure you have good interpretation correctness, typos, image issues, audio and video playback, things like that. And you also want to make it really easy for technically challenged reviewers to proof the tour content. Next slide. Okay, broadcasting. When everything is signed off and approved, you have to promote and advertise your new digital experience. Don't assume people will just stumble across it. Even linking your new experience from your website can take months to index over Google and the other search engines. Consider a digital experience or a virtual tour launch party. You can have devices handy that you can pass out, show attendees, or you can use a projector to walk them through the tour. Talk about the stops you've chosen, the objects you feature, even tasks you've developed. You can remind attendees why you've moved in this direction. If board members are present and you haven't already cleared it with them, you might have to explain how your new experience connects to your institution's mission. You can get some press, you can make flyers, you can advertise. Last slide. Okay, so every object story and tour or experience is unique. There are lots of ways to leverage your platforms to meet your institution's goals. Our contact information is on the screen, as well as a few QR codes that link to some notable digital experiences and how our clients use them. Now we'll answer a few questions from you all, and whatever questions we don't get to, we'll email you directly, like Dan said before. We'd also like to mention there will be a follow-up email with a link to share this webinar recording. So Dan, would you like to answer a few questions first?
Sure. It looks like there's been a few questions about kind of the difference between the API and just the CatalogIt hub. So let me just talk about that real quickly here. So the CatalogIt hub is a simple way of sharing some of your collections, whatever collections you want to share out to the world, and it's included with any CatalogIt subscription. So that's the API is kind of a step beyond that. The API allows you to take all those published items and do all kinds of other things with them in your own website. Or using a product like Todd's, like Visitor.us. I mean, Todd's basically taking those things that you're publishing and incorporating them into these tours, these virtual tours. So that's kind of the primary difference there. I mean, with the CatalogIt hub, you also have the ability to organize, essentially organize exhibitions. You can create folders, and you're publishing whole folders of things at a time in the CatalogIt hub, and when you create a new folder, there's a field there for a description, and the description that you add there will be published at the top of the folder of items that you're publishing. So that's where you can add the description, that's kind of the story about these items and what they mean, what their connection to each other is. And then a visitor can go through and click on each one of those and read about each one of those things, the specific fields that you're allowing to publish. And then once again, with the API, those things are getting pulled out and used all different kinds of other ways. Such as Todd's tour, where they can be virtually walking through the historic house and click on an item, and up pops the description, and perhaps even a video of all different kinds of things he can incorporate into that.
I have a question, Dan, that I can answer.
Sure.
So the question is, does Visitor help with videography needs, i.e. videoing for the tour, 3D imaging, etc.? We can, but you can actually do it yourself. Amazon or any other online retailer have panoramic cameras that you can purchase and set up and use yourself very easily. Usually there's two flavors. One has two fisheye lenses on either side of the camera that stitches the image together, and another rotates around with one fisheye lens, and it stitches the image together. And by the time you export it out of your panoramic camera, it becomes a flat, equal rectangular image. I'm saying that correctly. And then you can upload that into the Visitor system. And once you upload it, it's automatically the immersion 360 background. And from there, you can add hotspots on each object that you want to feature. Of course, you need to have the object in the space when you're taking your panoramic photo so that it's visible to the people that are looking at the panoramic photo. And then from there, you can add a touch spot with an icon, and then that'll pull up more information for that.
Todd, what do those cameras run? Do you know off the top of your head? Just
the Trisio Lite 2, which is one that kind of spins on its axis and has one lens. Last time I checked on Amazon, it was about $399.
Oh.
That could be pre-tariff. I don't really know. But there are all kinds of other ones. We've used a GoPro Hero. We have used a Ricoh Theta. There's a Theta X and a Theta Z. Those do really great photos. You can actually even use a Matterport camera. And I know Matterport has a platform that you can use to do this type of thing, but the cameras themselves are fairly pricey because they're really originally intended for real estate professionals to go and take photos of the spaces and homes that they're selling. But you can take a Matterport camera and you can export an equirectangular image that you can use. So if you have access to a Matterport camera, then you certainly could use that. But to answer the question more directly, sure, we would be we're available to come where you are and help you take some photographs if you would really like. But there are travel expenses and time, so it's really easy for us to tell you kind of how to get your own camera and take these photos yourselves and go from there.
Excellent. One of the viewers asked if there's a demo, if the demo is a live demo. It's actually the QR codes that Todd's presented here are actual demos. The Florence Nightingale's home is not a client of CatalogIt, but is a project of Visitor. The McFadden Ward House and the Antique Boat Museum, those are both CatalogIt clients. You can scan that QR code and that will open up the virtual tour, and you can play with it yourself. They're really pretty neat. So the demos are really they're right there for you. We also have another question about the QR codes themselves. A person's camera doesn't open the QR code. We're going to provide this all to everyone after the webinar. You all will get a thank you email and a link back to the recorded video, so you can scan that off another device if you need to. This person's also asking if we could provide a link. I think we can provide a link. That should be no problem at all. So we'll send you a link.
Well, another frequently asked question that we get is, can I start with a basic text and image tour and kind of graduate or add the virtual capability to it? Yes, you can. The way the way the Visitor system works is you build the tour based on the information that you have. So you build the tour with a stop, the next stop, the next stop. On each stop, you add objects and or you add tasks. Some of those objects may come from CatalogIt with the API. Some of it you can put straight into Visitor if it doesn't exist in CatalogIt, or maybe it's an info panel that is not really an object like would be in CatalogIt. You can create it directly in Visitor. And then once you do that, you basically have the bones or the skeleton of your tour, and it can be presented to people in what we call detail mode, which is you've got a paragraph about this stop, you've got a photo about this stop, and then a list of all the objects with photos and context and all that kind of good stuff that stream in below that. When you add a panoramic photo to any stop, then you're adding a panoramic layer to the data that's already there. So yes, you can start with a basic version, and then you can kind of move up to a virtual version. So you don't have to repeat your work, and you can start a little smaller and then just kind of get bigger from there.
All right. We actually have one of our participants is asking about how you write compelling descriptions on photos in your collection that you didn't have very much provenance on in the deed of gift. Or Catalog is actually, we've incorporated something relatively recently here now, and that is our AI image describe assistant, and that can be super helpful. It's really kind of an amazing new feature. I've demonstrated a lot, and I've actually used it quite a bit myself. If you open an entry to edit in CatalogIt and then click on that photo, you'll see on the caption box underneath, there's a little square. It looks like a little piece of paper icon. If you click on that, that opens the AI describe image assistant. And you could give it a hint text if you know anything at all about the photo, if you know maybe who the people are, the time period, put in whatever you kind of hints you might have for the thing. And then you can ask it to describe, up to as much as 200 words of text description. And then just click the describe image, the button there. And within a few seconds, it will have analyzed that image and provide a nice description. You're going to want to read through that and make sure that it's as accurate as possible. But that's a great way to add a lot of additional information regarding the image. It's particularly good with historic photos. It will look at the type of clothing that people are wearing. If it's a kind of a street scene, it will look at the types of cars, and if it can identify the cars that are in the street or street signs, things that you may not have thought to describe if you were describing an image yourself. And it will do it much quicker typically than the average person can create a description for that image. And all that becomes searchable and findable within your collection. So I recommend you take a look at that. There's also, if you go to our support site, you can just search for describe image assistant or AI assistant, and you'll find some instructions of how to use that feature.
Okay, Dan, we have a couple of quick questions that I think I can answer at one time. The question about a demo is they wanted to kind of see how the systems both worked, and both of our both CatalogIt and Visitor has a free 30-day trial. So if you go to visitor.us and go to the pricing page, then you will see the ability to sign up for a 30-day free trial on that. And I think CatalogIt kind of has a personal version of CatalogIt that you can kind of play around with. Isn't that right?
We do. I mean, you have to be publishing to the hub though. So you want to be, make sure that you're an account that you're already publishing to the hub. And if you want to try this out, we'd be happy to enable the API for you to test with a system like Visitor.
Okay. Someone asked, how does the Visitor system connect to our website? The Visitor system is a separate system, kind of like CatalogIt compared to your own website. So once you create your tour or experience, all it is just a quick copy the link and stick it in your website. If you use WordPress, you might have a button at the top of your page that says virtual tour, or it might say experiences, and then you should be able to create that, put that URL in that link and go directly to it. Same with CatalogIt Hub, and then CatalogIt, of course, has the WordPress plugin too. Okay, looking here. Is CatalogIt included in a certain, I'm sorry, is Visitor included in a certain CatalogIt subscription? There's an idea. It is not
It's
currently.
not.
They
Yeah,
are independent, but
well, I was gonna say with
definitely.
Catalog, I mean, you'd subscribe, you'd add the API subscription to your base subscription, and that enables you first of all to publish directly instead of using the CatalogIt Hub. You could publish directly onto your own website, so you could have your folders displayed within your own website and individual objects displayed, throughout wherever you want to put them. And you could use something like the CatalogIt, the WordPress, the CatalogIt plugins, WordPress plugins, which are a super easy way to incorporate your collections into your website if you've got a WordPress website. You can also, if you've got that kind of the technical chops, the API, the raw API will enable you to basically create your own display of the items that you want to publish directly onto your website. But the API is the connection that Todd would use to pull those published things into something like Visitor.
Mm-hmm. Here's one. What are the fees for this service? Both of our entities and both of our websites have, out in the open pricing. If you go to visitor.us/pricing, you will see there's a couple of flavors of Visitor. And like I said, you can start small and move up from there. Dan, I don't really know what the URL for your pricing page is, but just go into www.catalogit.app. You should be able to find it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, under products pricing. And our pricing, I mean, the API is $350, an additional $350. So that's simple. And as Todd mentioned, we're both very open with all our pricing. It's all listed there.
Okay. Can Visitor create digital virtual tours, creating the digital space, meaning creating a space that doesn't exist as a physical space? So Visitor as an entity may not be able to create the image of the space, but if you were able to kind of have that rendered, then you could bring that into the Visitor system. And if I understand this correctly, possibly put together a walkthrough of a pending museum gallery, for example, something along those lines, something that you might have CGI rendered as a plan for something in the future. As long as you can get this flat, equal rectangular, it's basically like a circular image that's all flattened out. If you can get access to that image, you can put it in the Visitor system and you can make an experience out of that.
Here's kind of a good question. Somebody notes that they work at a natural history museum and they wonder how you can suggestions for a narrative that's not necessarily human based. Well, certainly. And as I mentioned, the characters in your story they don't have to be humans. They could be objects, they could be entities. So I mean, the creatures or plants in the Natural History Museum can certainly be the characters. And I mean, the kind of the first thought that comes to mind is imagine, the world that has existed maybe 66 million years ago. Here's this, I guess peaceful world with dinosaurs roaming all around, and then all of a sudden, wow, here's the climax. A meteor hits the earth and it changes everything. And so here are some of those creatures. They try to survive, they don't survive pretty quickly, but here are these little proto mammals and they survive and they make it through and they evolve into what we are today. So there's certainly stories that you could do with the Natural History Museum as well that are long before humans.
We talked to a lot of people at the last conference Dan and I attended, and to tack onto this Natural History Museum, a lot of those museums will have interactives and activities. And if there's a way for your interactive and your activity to be available on the web, and it may or may not be the case, then the visitor system can link to it. So people that are looking at a virtual version, of course, a virtual version is not a replacement for being there in person. Everybody knows that that's the case. But if you were looking at a virtual version, you could feasibly link to the web and the web available interactive, and so people could kind of experience the same type of fun playing with the interactive things like that. Here's a good question. How does Visitor compared with Bloomberg Connects? So Bloomberg Connects, I personally know that I believe it's a free service. I do not know how easy it is to edit things yourself in Bloomberg Connects, and I am not exactly sure how the system works in regards to creating the virtual spaces. So I may not be qualified to answer that, but I can certainly look into it because I do need to do more research on Bloomberg Connects. Dan, there's a question about AI image description.
Yeah. What is the AI image API integration? So that's included with any account in CatalogIt. So if you if you've uploaded an image, you have to have saved the entry already. So the image has to already exist in your entry. Then click the entry to edit it. Click on the image, and below in the caption, there's two fields below. There's a description and a caption field. You want to there's a little icon at the end of that caption field. Click on that icon, and that opens up the AI image description. It's really pretty fun to use. So by all means, give it a shot.
Okay, here's one. If a tour was created during the demo trial, I assume this is a visitor question, and the trial expires, would that tour be lost or would that link become defunct? So what happens in the visitor system if your 30-day trial is over and you haven't gone ahead and paid for your license, then it'll give you within 10 days of it expiring, it's going to give you a warning that says when your trial is over. So all you have to do is just pay for the license, and all your work is still there. Nothing, it doesn't delete anything during the trial period. In fact, the system holds on to things even if they've already expired. There's still data in there that could be retrieved. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. Are there any limits to the number of tours or experiences I can add to Visitor? That kind of goes along with another question. Do I need more than one license or account to have more than one tour or experience? So all you need is one license. You can create as many tours, as many stops, as many objects, and as many tasks as you want in the system. For example, if you were a municipality or your museum is part of a municipality and the city has a bunch of different museums, the city could get one visitor license and share experiences from all the different museums on this one license. The only problem with that is there's one login for each visitor license. So you would have to share a login with all the other museums that you work with in the city. So if you're okay with that, or if all of the museums fall under the city and there's really only one person that's going to manage the content, then sure, you could do it like that. But a lot of people like to kind of keep a little separation. So it just kind of depends on your scenario and your situation, and how secure you need the login to be for your content.
Someone's asking about do we provide viewing metrics? So if you're using the API and publishing to your website, your own website's going to keep track, of course, of all your viewer metrics. If you're just using the CatalogIt Hub, you'll soon be able to use, included with just the basic CatalogIt Hub, you'll be able to use Google Analytics there. And then later on, we're talking about expanding that to allow for additional metrics measurements. But in the meantime, that's where we're at. Todd, you could talk about Visitor. I think that's a great question.
Right. So Visitor has, when you put your tours together, we have a handy utility called the tour map. And all it is a flattened out version of your tours. And it's the tour name and all the stops and all the objects. It kind of looks like a little outline. And in that, you'll see all the context and all the text that goes along with each of the stops and objects. It will record how many times that stop or that object has been viewed. Now that's just basic views, and that counts you as well if you're in there managing your data. But the visitor system has, in your license section, you have the ability to drop in Google Analytics code, and that analytics code shows up on every page that gets pulled up when someone is viewing your tour or experience. So yes, you can definitely use Google Analytics to get really detailed metrics on where people start in your tour or where people spend the most time in your tour, things along those lines. It's definitely recommended to use something like that.
All right. Somebody thanked me for the describing or talking about the AI describe image assistant, which again I think is a really fun thing. And they're just asking if there are going to be any more additions or updates coming to Catalog. Well, hopefully, if you've been with us for a while, you realize that there constantly are, and there's Catalog. It just continues to evolve. So there's quite a bit in our hopper. We've just recently added to our engineering team pretty substantially here. So you're going to see lots of new things. I don't want to go into any details yet. It's hard to mention something now that it takes longer than we thought to make, but there certainly is a lot coming along in the hopper in the near term. So.
On the visitor side, we do have regular updates. Right now, we're working on an update where each tour and experience can have, for the virtual view, can have different things showing. And if you look at if you can get the QR codes to take you to some of the experiences, you'll see that sometimes there's a navigation menu in the top left. Sometimes there's a map that appears in the top right. And then there's the pane, the detail pane for each stop that gives you the context for the stop. And you can set whether it opens by default or closes by default. You can set tours to guided tour. When you're in the virtual mode, you have a next stop and previous stop. And then you can when you open the map, a lot of times you can set all of the, say you have a floor plan for a second story of a house, you can set links for each of those rooms that are in the floor plan that you've designated as stops. So we're working on a lot of that stuff. Myself and my business partner are the developers of Visitor. You send me an email if you're using Visitor or you want to use Visitor, but you would like it to do something very specific that you see that it may not do. We're always all ears on updates to try to make it better for everybody. So feel free to reach out to us. And for any of you who are interested in either a CatalogIt demo or a Visitor demo where we can kind of walk you through some things, I'm not going to speak for Dan, but send me an email at todd@primesiteweb.com and we'll be happy to set up a kind of a video call, no obligation. We'll just kind of show you around the system. Visitor also has tutorial videos that we can send you links to tell you, visually how to do every single thing that you can do in Visitor. And as in the case of the Antique Boat Museum, this was a client that came along earlier this year. And what they did, if you've looked at it with the QR code, is they have a single boat shed. They're in Clayton, New York, and they have a boat shed. And all around the boat shed, there are paddlecraft, so canoes or kayaks, and they're all over the place on all the walls, even up on the ceiling. So it made sense for them to have a panoramic image so you can scroll up and you can look, or you can look behind yourself. So they took one panoramic image of this boat shed. And for each of those boats that you see on the walls and the ceilings in the facility, there is a touch point. And when you click the touch point, you get more context to what that paddlecraft actually is. Now, we knew that it would do that. That was kind of what Visitor was intended to do. But they took it a step further and they ordered 2 computer terminals and they put one on each end of the boat shed. So while you're in the boat shed, you can actually use the virtual experience, scroll around, touch, and get context on each of the boats. So they don't need a book, or they don't need a big brochure, or they don't need docents that know every single detail. You can get it yourself right there. So essentially the Visitor system has turned into a kiosk for them. And you can do that in the case of Florence Nightingale's home. That's the plan for that tour. So Florence Nightingale's home is in Derbyshire, England, which is way north of the museum, which is in the basement of the St. Thomas Hospital, just right off the Thames in London. So what they said was, this museum is about Florence Nightingale. How do we get the experience of her childhood home into this museum where it makes a lot of sense? So we digitized it. The client actually digitized it themselves with a Trizio 2 Lite, sent us the images. We built the experience for them, put all the images in there. They can manage it themselves, but we went ahead and put it all together for them. And it's ready to be installed into the museum in London. You know, I don't know however many miles away it is in Derbyshire where the house resides, and ready for them to put it up on a touchscreen display so they can kind of use it. So a lot of really cool new uses for the Visitor system that we didn't really originally think about, but we're pretty excited about that.
All right, everybody. Well, I think that's about it for now. And again, if we didn't get to your question, or if you have any more questions, by all means, reach out to either Todd or me. We will be sending out an email shortly once this we're recording this. Once the recording is done, we'll send out an email. You'll have a link back to the video, so you can watch it again anytime you want to, or share it with colleagues if you like. We certainly appreciate your time today and hope that you learned something, and want you to get out there and create those stories.
Thank you, everybody.